huge step backwards if this passes. We are not taking care of this city's future. Everything that you see up there that has been cut is about the future of the city of Lake Worth. The prior commission has worked to protect not just the present, but the future. I worked on building a $24.9 million reverse osmosis water plant that protects this city for the generations to come. So I think it's important to know we did not see the graph that shows that by 2016 we're going into a $7 million deficit. This is a 30-year commitment of paying these pensions. So we basically have to look for this extra $1.4 million for the next 30 years. I want to point out something that states here, for example, in the human resource, the things that are in the backup that we didn't talk about. Promotional activity for the Human Resource Department. Promotional activity funding reductions leave no way to rebuild a largely fragmented workforce. That's our workforce. So I want to point that out, that there is no money to rebuild our largely fragmented workforce. Here again, I don't know who's paying for the CPAs. Who's paying for the CPA since that training budget is being set to be reviewed?
We put enough back in to provide some continuing education in the current year.
Okay. I also want to point out that the word defer on capital projects has been mentioned throughout this reduction. Defer is another word for procrastinating and an obligation. We're deferring the replacement of many obligations in this city with no date of when they're going to be done. So this community basically is going to be you can expect a lower quality of life and a lower quality of service from this city government. Because right here, defer the replacement of the Sunset Pavilion roof. We're deferring the replacement of another roof over at the pier. You can begin to see continued deterioration of the city. I drive on 2nd Avenue South from Dixie Highway over to K Street. You would think that street is filled with potholes. So you can continue to see more, actually less, quality of life. If you go to the piece about leisure services, there's a $230,000 estimated savings. Reduce funding for repairs and reduce funding for repairs and renovation of recreation facilities. Reduce funding for replacements of recreation equipment. Eliminate all new recreation programs. Is that really what we want? It's not what I want. And I don't think I was elected into office to be taking this city backwards. So I disagree with you, Mayor, that you said this is taking it into a positive direction. We clearly are going into a negative direction. And my responsibility as one of your elected officials is to take care of the future of the city, not just today while I am in office. So I'm really disappointed that having served up here for 3 years that we're getting ready to move backward.
I take it personally, Commissioner Mulvihill, but it's no surprise how you feel about me. So, moving on. If I may finish, she addressed me and I would like to recant, okay? First of all, staff was spoken to in regards to many of those recreation projects. And according to staff, I don't want you to think that this is some willy-nilly thing that just came out of the blue, kind of like the fire assessment. I think that, you know, I question, if you're questioning me, I question how many years did you defer the position of an internal auditor, which was required by our charter? Okay, so, you know, we can all ask questions and you can use an accusatory tone, but it doesn't sit well with me because I have been working extremely hard with staff who has made compromises to dig further into this budget to relieve and repeal this assessment. And knowing full well that going into the next budget meetings, we will be more attentive and reprioritize the needs of the city, working with staff hand in hand, something that I'm not so sure has happened in the past, but finding out their needs for the growth of the city and the sustainability of the city in all departments, where they're needed, where projects are happening. You fire 70 employees, 50 employees, 40 employees, wherever we're talking about, and you ask, to cut across the board without saying what can be saved and what can't be saved. If we're planning the future of this city, we have to take all of it into account. We have done so. Staff has done so. Staff has sharpened their pencils beyond sharp. And for that I am grateful. But for 1 second, I did not just come out of the blue and say, boom, we're going to cut this, cut that, cut this. I'm somewhat tired of your attacks on me, Commissioner Mulvihill. I'm really disappointed in many things as well. But I think that, kind of like when you're in a family, Commissioner Mulvihill, when you're in a family, how you can be angry at your brother, but if anybody else in the world picks on your brother, you stand up for your brother. I feel that way about this commission, and I sort of resent the fact that you're going to be calling me out every single time I say this card is blue, you say it's red, and I think it's a waste of time. Let's move back to this, the repeal of the assessment. I understand we have a motion and a second. Commissioner McVoy, I would love for you to talk.
That's very gracious. Thank you, Mayor. If we could put that graph back up. And for those of you listening from home, this is a graph that extends from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 16. It has 2 lines on it. The vertical axis is millions of our fund balance. The top portion of the graph is 0 and a few positive millions, and then the bottom portion is about twice that many negative millions. Where we were with the previous budget passed in September, October, somewhere in that range, we were basically holding our own positive. That was the goal. That when we talk about letting 40 or 70 employees go, as I've mentioned before in the dais, that was the hardest thing that I did up here, to do that. I knew that individual families were going to be extremely affected. But I also knew that our finances as a city, we have a legal requirement to be at net zero. Whatever we're bringing in, that's what we can spend. And if we aren't bringing in more, we can't be spending more. So we had to make those cuts. We made a bunch of cuts. We cut millions of dollars out. Our budget was at 44 million, the general fund, a few years back. We're down to 30. As we move to not keep the fire assessment in, that graph heads just south. It just goes downhill because we have this expense year in, year out coming forward. And if we choose to not have a revenue stream for it, we are going further and further in the hole. And it's fine to talk that we're going to revisit the budget, we're going to do better, and we're going to bring those employees back, and we're going to do more services. That's talking about increasing the budget. Where's that money going to come from? Are you going to raise taxes? Are you going to do the assessment next year? It's nice to say that thank staff, but staff was squeezed. You gave them no option. You said you had a comprehensive plan that would save $2 million. I haven't seen it. It was a nice idea, and I wish you had that plan because we would love to have an extra $2 million. But we don't. We are headed in the process of knocking $1.75 million off of it and telling people that everything will be fine, there won't be any further reductions. And I think we're not being very candid with people. We're going to bring in less income and everything will be fine, and in fact it'll get better. It won't, it'll get worse.
Commissioner Maxwell?
Can we hear from the public?
I would love that. Ron, excellent.